So, I was sitting there recording a video saying, yeah, when all the mastery and the Jason info comes out for the new Path of Exile skill tree, I'll make a video about it, you know, blah, 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 blah. Uploaded my video, and then the Jason stuff came out. So, we are going to be talking about how ridiculous, frankly, a bunch of these masteries are. So if you are new or part of the large percentage of people who are still not subscribed to this YouTube channel, make sure to do that so that these videos will show right up in your feed, and like the video if you're enjoying all the content. And let's just jump directly into it. Now, a lot of these masteries, I mean, I've kind of like picked through a bunch of them and they seem really, really, really strong. But I just want to kind of go over the list and tell you which ones I think that you should really be looking for, because a lot of these seem very, very powerful. So one thing that you'll notice in a lot of these masteries is that there is just a ton of resistances, all elemental resistances, chaos resistance just built into a lot of these masteries. This means that if you just randomly take one of these masteries because you need the points for it, you probably are going to get a bunch of resistances, which is really nice that you don't have to travel all over the tree, or there's not going to be specific portions of the tree that are just loaded with resistance. You're going to be able to get them pretty much wherever you want. Starting with the elemental mastery, 40% increased effect of non-damaging ailments can be pretty big for certain builds. Think like brittle scaling, or think like shock and things like this. This could be quite a bit of damage, as well as gain 10% of physical damage as extra damage of a random element. If you are playing pretty much any build that scales elemental damage of an ailment, that's pretty solid. And then 1% of elemental damage leached as energy shield. Potentially, this could be really, really powerful. Under sword mastery, the thing that stands out to me is 8% chance to gain a frenzy charge when you hit a unique enemy. There are a lot of builds that use swords that this is just going to essentially fill the spot of alt quality blood rage. If you're using a sword, you essentially just have frenzy charges when you're hitting a unique enemy. You don't need alt quality blood rage. You don't need any way to generate frenzy charges anymore. This just does it for you. There is also a little bit of impale here, which is probably going to mean that you don't have to get all of the impale nodes on the tree to be able to have 100% impale, as well as a little bit of crit strike chance. One thing that was struggling a little bit with like melee type crit builds was that they couldn't actually get enough chance. So this is probably going to be pretty powerful. Axe mastery ended up getting enemies you hit are destroyed on kill. That's a really powerful effect if you're wanting something like that. They also get increased onslaught effect, which is really super powerful. I mean, honestly, I could see a raider just like taking some random axe nodes just to get increased onslaught effect if you really wanted to go super fast. As well as 10% more damage when enemies are on low life. That's essentially 5% more damage overall. And some rage generation. Axe mastery looks really cool if there were that many builds that really use axes. Staff mastery is kind of interesting. We get a bunch of recovery when you block. Staves do block pretty easily. 30% increased defenses. This is just overall defenses like energy shield, armor, evasion, all just get 30% across the board while you're wielding a staff. You got some extra chance to block, some double stun duration. Unholy Might on block for 3 seconds is pretty strong, and then 60 to crit strike multiplier if you haven't dealt a critical strike recently. This, of note, will be useful for things where you yourself never crit, but maybe like a totem or something crits if you happen to ever use a staff for that. Mace mastery is getting all damage with maces and scepters inflict chill. That's pretty cool. 12% chance to deal double damage with attacks if attack time is longer than 1 second. I mean, you don't normally try to get your attack time to be more than 1 second, so I don't know how good this is, but maybe if you're doing like a really slow attack build, maybe that's okay. And then hits that stun enemies have Culling Strike. Mace Mastery, this is the main thing that I'm interested in. All damage inflicts chill, that seems pretty solid. Minion Offensive Mastery is just getting a bunch of damage stats essentially. Chance to get Unholy Might on kill, some crit strike, accuracy. Increased effective offerings is really powerful, so this could be the one that you really do go for. Overwhelming physical damage reduction typically isn't too powerful, but penetrating 8% of cursed enemies' elemental resistances is something that the elemental-based specters are really going to be looking for. Shield Mastery is actually getting some pretty powerful things like the crit strike multiplier per 10 maximum energy shield and percentage increased attack damage per 75 armor or evasion just being on the tree now, as well as some intimidate, some extra chance to block. This is really powerful, but they did kind of annihilate shield builds a little bit. Their skills got hit pretty hard. We'll have to see if the numbers end up adding up for this. These are potentially pretty good. The Bleeding Mastery, the only thing here that really seems of worthwhile is damage over time multiplier for bleeding enemies per endurance charge. There aren't really any like bleed poison builds that work too well. I tried one like SST poison gladiator thing and it worked conceptually, but it wasn't great. Moving while bleeding doesn't cause you to take extra damage. I guess that's cool, but you'd rather just be immune to bleeding, right? So I don't know. Bleeding Mastery doesn't seem like this is too amazing. Impale Mastery has some pretty nuts stuff in here. So 100% increased mana reservation efficiency for Dread Banner. That's nuts. Overwhelm is actually not really great for Impale. You get a ton of this naturally, so it really doesn't do that much. And then all of the Call of Steel effectiveness things, like the stuff that was on the tree previously, is just built into the Impale Mastery now. So you just don't have to grab these things, you just get them for free. And 20% increased effective Impale you inflict on non-impaled enemies. That's not super powerful, it just means that you get like the first impale. This is going to be good for clear, and like the first impale that you get will hit really hard, so it's kind of okay. But the main thing is really just the usefulness of like use speed and such for Call of Steel, as well as essentially free Dread Banner. Totems actually got some pretty crazy stuff. Skills that would summon a totem have 30% chance to summon 2 totems instead. That's insane. 5% of damage from hits is taken from your nearest totem's life before you. That's crazy. Taunting enemies for 1 second when they're summoned. 60% increased global crit strike chance if you summon a totem recently. Totem Mastery seems nuts. It's too bad that they nerfed like the best totem build, but I'm sure there's going to be some more out there. Critical Mastery has essentially a few very potent things, and the rest of it, I mean, seems okay, right? We've got 25% to critical strike multiplier against unique enemies. That's really powerful. Plus 3 to level of all critical support gems. There's a few of these. Notably, crit strikes and crit damage are 2 that just seem to be pretty popular now after the buff, so those are just going to get 3 levels. Also, increased crit strike chance against enemies on full life. This will be really good for clear. So crit's got some pretty decent stuff. Mana Mastery actually has a lot of mana fixing built into it, but as far as I can really see here, none of this, besides maybe chance to recover 10% of mana when you use a skill, is like super useful for mana stacking builds. This just kind of seems like, I mean, you got to recover 10% of mana when you use a guard skill, 10% of damage taken recouped as mana. Maybe these two, like this one here and this one here, are pretty good for mana stacking builds, but other than that, the rest of these don't really look that impressive. It's just those two mainly. Life Mastery has a lot of good stuff in here. If you are a build that uses like your life to cast abilities, that's pretty solid, but I mean, like 10% increased maximum life trading for 10 reduced life recovery rate isn't that bad. 50 just based extra added life is really good. Mostly free vitality. I mean, there's quite a bit that's good here. 50% increased life recovery from Flask when used on low life. If you're playing a build like the Steel Champion that I'm going to be making, you just are always on low life, essentially, so this is going to be just constantly happening. I mean, the Life Mastery looks pretty solid. I don't know how I feel about Armor Mastery. There's a couple things in here that seem cool. I don't know how I feel about a chance to defend with double armor. That doesn't seem great. Maybe reduced extra damage from critical strikes is okay, but I'm pretty sure you can become, like, immune to critical strikes. Determination reduced mana cost is okay, and then there's this line that says reflect physical damage equal to 500% of physical damage prevented when hit. I don't know how good this is going to be, but I feel like somewhere out there this is going to potentially open up some kind of weird Thorns build. We'll see if that happens, but Armor Mastery doesn't look too insane. Now, Armor and Energy Shield Mastery, on the other hand, has some pretty good stuff in it. And mainly, the increases and reductions to armor also apply to Energy Shield recharge rate at 20% of their value. So if you're stacking a bunch of armor, you could probably just get up to like an almost instant Energy Shield recharge. That seems pretty solid. Physical Mastery also has a lot of interesting things. Notably, Impale just seems like it's going to be easier to obtain now. You just get like Impale chance from pretty much all of the physical base type masteries, so that's pretty good. Free War Banner. Overwhelm is not as useful as a lot of people think that it is. Increase physical damage with skills that cost life. That's going to be pretty solid. Unfortunately, the skills that leave lingering blades, mainly like ones used off of Blade Blast has just been nerfed so hard that this isn't like super useful right now, but maybe there might be a resurgence at some point if Blade Blast ever gets, unnerfed, but, it's not going to happen. We've already seen Fire Mastery, but like recovering 2% life when you ignite a non-ignited enemy, that's really, really solid for clear recovery. The conversion of damage from physical to fire is really good. This is on enemies hitting you, which is kind of okay. And then fire damage over time multiplier, very good. Also, this fire damage strength stacking stuff seems pretty solid. Fire Mastery overall is okay. Now, Reservation Mastery, 8% increased damage for each of your aura or herald skills affecting you. For like a build, say like Petrified Blood that runs like 5, 6, maybe 7 auras nowadays, this is a lot of damage actually. It's a pretty insane amount. And then on top of that, auras from your skills have 15% increased effect on you, and then like increased life reservation efficiency, increased mana reservation efficiency, This top line seems pretty good, to be honest with you. Now, we've seen the brand mastery before. The notable thing here is just going to be that brands attach to a new enemy each time they activate, no more than once every 3 seconds, or rather 0.3 seconds. This is essentially the Holy Conquest node from before. This is really, really powerful. Leveling with brands is going to be really good with this now, so that's really good. Leech mastery is about what you would expect: maximum total life, mana, energy recovery, damage while leeching, and increased total recovery per second from all those things. This is pretty standard. We need more of this on the tree, so that's pretty good. Moving the Warcries cannot exert travel skills onto the Warcry mastery is very nice. We don't have to just essentially waste, you know, like an extra weird or go towards a point for it. Recover 15% of life when you use a Warcry is pretty powerful. And then the Warcries have a minimum of 10 power is really, really good. I think a lot of builds might take a Warcry node simply for this. And this is going to enable quite a bit, and it's going to require people not have to use like things like that one shield and stuff like that. I think we had seen this before, but that's pretty good. The attribute masteries, this is just 5% generic increased attributes. That could help you with a lot of stuff on attribute builds. The rest of these seem pretty solid. It depends on how many mastery passive skills that you're really getting, but this is the main one that I think is pretty good. Block mastery just has extra block, extra spell block, life and mana gained when you block, which is notably pretty good. Them just tossing this onto a random block node is pretty powerful. And then 3% increased spell damage and attack damage per chance to block spells or attack. That's pretty good. Attack mastery has access to some additional strike range, as well as strike skills which target additional enemies, can do so from 30% further away. This will be really good for clear, really good for like staying a little bit further from bosses. And then we've got like increased attack damage per 16 strength. The rest of these, I mean, we don't use too many stance skills, to be honest with you. Ruthless hits intimidating enemies for 4 seconds is interesting if your build does use Ruthless, of course. Now, one that I'm pretty interested in is this dual wielding mastery. There is a lot here because I'm going to be doing dual wield block on the Steel Champ. That's the idea that I've got going here. And a lot of this stuff is actually just kind of insane because we take a lot of dual wield nodes, right? So if we want to, we can change out the inherent attack block that you get from dual wielding to spell block. That could be good later on, depending on how much of each that we scale. And then we're going to get 20% chance to gain elusive when you block while dual wielding. This is nuts to me. The fact that this is on here just seems kind of insane, because the new elusive is going to give chance to avoid damage, and we're going to be blocking all the time, and this just seems nuts to me, right? Just free elusive, essentially. We don't need to get that on boots anymore. We can get this super early. We can get additional chance to block attack damage if you haven't blocked recently. It's honestly not too great, but then we just also get free maim and blind. Dual wield mastery seems really good, and I'm super happy about this. As well, under fortify mastery, we just get access to easy fortify. Melee hits just simply fortify, but it gives you some minus maximum fortification. You can simply just get additional maximum fortification. This is mainly going to be good for builds that are actually using the fortify mechanic. I don't know that, like say for example, champion builds that just get 20 stacks of fortify. If you don't have another way to gain additional stacks of fortification, this isn't going to do anything for you. But if you are a champion, you can take this reduced damage over time taken while you have at least 20 stacks of fortification. That will be pretty good. None of the rest of these really help you, but we tend to only take like one of these nodes anyways, so taking some reduced damage might be worthwhile. They've added in linked mastery. This is only really going to be useful for like minion builds or people playing in parties. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, like elemental ailments can be avoided by people you have linked with you. So say if you're playing in like a big 5-man and you have a link to each of your party members and you are immune to elemental ailments, that makes them immune to elemental ailments essentially. You can make them take less damage, and enemies near your linked targets have fire, cold, and lightning exposure. This is making party play seem a little bit more interesting. In the minion defense mastery, notably, we get linked skills can target minions. This is going to open up quite a bit of different things that minions can do. And then also we're getting minions recover 5% of life on minion death. I don't know if there's going to be any weird shenanigans that could potentially happen from this, but potentially, like recovering life on minion death, I feel like something is going to get broken with this particular node, so should be pretty interesting. Two-handed mastery, most of these don't seem too crazy. We got chance to deal triple damage, which is okay. Increased damage with hits against rares and uniques, that seems pretty solid. And then we have like reduced attack speed, but deal increased damage. I don't necessarily feel like most of this is very good. Maybe increased armor and evasion is pretty good. You could get like up to 60% increased armor, that might be solid. Under curse mastery, we're getting just blanket 20% 100% chance to ignite free shock and poison cursed enemies. So if you deal any of those kinds of damage, you're just going to be able to do that. Chance to gain maximum doom, and the non-cursed enemies you inflict non-cursed auras on are blinded for 4 seconds. That seems pretty solid. We do just get like enemies you curse are hindered. We're getting increased mana reservation, and then, you know, there's a decent amount of good stuff here in curses. Under resistance and ailment protection, you can just become immune to a whole bunch of stuff, mainly corrupted blood. I feel like this part, and maybe even this part down here for just some free resistances, if you're gonna go resistance and ailment protection in any way anyways, these two seem pretty solid. Anytime that I can go immune to corrupted blood is a good time for me. Energy shield mastery, we have seen this before. We can get the, like, you know, light radius is based on energy shield, not having to take that node that's up near low life. Immune to freeze, if we have started recharge recently, this might end up being used on the trapper that I'm going to be making. Stun threshold being moved over to energy shield is really nice if you're not able to go immune to stun, but a lot of energy shield builds can. And then most energy shield builds do use discipline, so getting some mana reservation efficiency for it is pretty good. Accuracy mastery, I'm not like super keen on how accuracy stack builds and things work, so maybe this is some of this is good. I really don't know. Like, precision will be cheaper, but the rest of this doesn't really seem too amazing to me, so I might be wrong here, but I'm not sure. Wand mastery, meaning wand attacks are getting quite a bit of interesting stuff to it. We're getting, you know, chance to gain power charges, which is pretty common on wands, just free unnerve, additional projectiles. We're getting the classic increases and reductions to spell damage also apply to attacks. Some attack damage leeches life and mana, and then intelligence is added to accuracy rating with wands. Damage over time mastery, a 10% to damage over time multiplier if you've killed recently is really good. Skill effect duration is really good, and increased effect of cruelty, I guess that's okay if you're using cruelty on your build. Chaos mastery we have seen before. I know a lot of people are freaking out about this +1 to level of all chaos skill gems. I feel like this is only really worthwhile if your build is using Essence Drain in some manner, because otherwise, like Toxic Rain, this is complete bait. You're not going to be able to sustain it very easily. Maybe with like a crazy build that has like a ton of recovery going on it, but I really just feel like this is kind of bait. Increased effect of Withered is very powerful, and then 40% of Fizz damage converted to Chaos damage is also really, really powerful. This might open up some Fizz to Chaos conversion type stuff going on, and then of course, if you already are stacking Chaos resistance, you can get quite a bit of percentage Chaos damage over time multiplier. Flask mastery, if you do use pretty much any flask nodes on the tree, recovering 10% of life when you use a life flask, that's pretty good. Just gaining a bunch of random charges. Increased effect of flask can be pretty powerful, especially on a flask-oriented build, and then removing random elemental ailments or removing random non-elemental ailments can also be pretty powerful for those kinds of builds. Lightning mastery is getting a ton of the standard stuff that you see on like lightning cluster jewels and such. There's a lot of good stuff here. We're getting the conversion like most of the elemental masteries are. Lightning damage with non-critical strikes is lucky, so if you happen to be playing a non-crit lightning build, pretty good. The maximum increase of shock is here. Increased critical strike chance against shocked enemies is really good. Non-projectile chaining lightning skills chain +1 times, think like arc. And then increases and reductions to maximum mana also apply to shock effect at 30% of their value. This is pretty much targeted at Archmage. Might be good. Now, caster mastery got some pretty interesting things. Spells cause you to gain mana equal to their cost every 5th time you cast them, essentially meaning every 5th cast is free. Cannot be chilled or frozen while casting a spell. Increase maximum intensity and seals, and 1% increased spell damage per 16 intelligence. Seems pretty solid. Also, final repeat of spells gains 30% increased area of effect. This would be pretty good for like one of those like ball lightning multicast builds, but those kind of aren't that great right now, so you know. Charge mastery is making it so that you are just essentially immune to ignite, chill, or shock when you're at the maximum of each of those charges. So I'm assuming you get charge mastery when you take like maybe like an additional charge, or you take like, you know, the nodes that give you access to charges on hit or something like that. I think that's where these are going to be, so that's pretty good. Duration mastery, more skill effect duration and less skill effect duration, both super powerful, and reduced elemental ailment duration on you. These are going to be like those nodes that are in the middle of the tree. Just getting some more skill effect duration is going to be pretty good for those kinds of builds, like for the Trapper build or for like the Toxic Rain build. Really good. Armor and evasion mastery, gaining 5% of evasion rating as extra armor could be pretty solid. Some increased evasion rating and armor per frenzy and endurance charge. Defiance banner being free. No one really uses that. Maybe they will now. I don't know. And then 1 to evasion rating per 1 armor on gloves. Seemingly okay. It's mainly this one, I feel, and maybe these two. Nobody really uses Defiance Banner. I mean, maybe they will. I don't know, but I'm not feeling like it's going to be too useful. Now, Cold Mastery has a lot of good stuff. So enemies become chilled as they unfreeze. This is okay. It's got the standard 40% conversion. This is going to enable the trap build, the fizz trap build, to convert to cold very easily. We've also got 25% chance to gain a frenzy charge when you shatter an enemy. This is essentially just free frenzy charges for any cold hit build, pretty good. An extra 5 cold exposure is always nice. And curses on enemies in your chilling areas have 15% increased effect. This is actually really powerful for any build that's using chilling areas. Creeping Frost, for example. I don't know that it's going to be enough to make Creeping Frost like really good, but we'll see. Evasion Mastery. Cannot be stunned if you haven't been hit recently. I'm really glad this is in here. A source of stun immunity is going to be very, very nice. Some free movement speed if we haven't been hit recently, as well as a bunch of chance to avoid poison, bleeding, and impaled. Not that important. Grace is particularly going to be potentially very powerful for certain builds, and 100% increased evasion rating from your body armor. This is super powerful. You can get some body armors with evasion on them with like thousands and thousands of evasion. This is nuts. This is going to help us really get up to those high levels of evasion that we were hoping we were going to be able to. This is really powerful. Now, mines have gotten some interesting stuff. They've put in mines cannot be damaged here, which is pretty good. Each mine applies 2% increased damage or 2% reduced damage dealt to enemies. These were notably on the tree before. Increased effect of auras of your mines is really powerful for certain mines. Don't overlook this one. Also, we're getting some additional regeneration of life per second if you've detonated a mine recently. Pretty good. Now, Bow Mastery. We're getting 2 very notable things here. One is going to be 50% increased Mirage Archer duration. This is really powerful for Deadeyes who use, like, say, if you're doing like Toxic Rain Mirage Archers, where you drop them on the ground, they're going to stay a lot longer. And then increased movement speed while phasing, as well as chance to gain phasing for 4 seconds on kill. Resource of phasing, increased Mirage Archer duration, really going to push people towards thinking maybe the Deadeye, you know, might be pretty good for Toxic Rain for single target. The rest of this, increased area of effect is okay, particularly the one that I'm interested in, Toxic Rain. And increased area of effect is not amazing for us, unfortunately, anymore because of the way that it scales. And then Blink Arrow and Mirror Arrow also will be up more often. Blind Mastery, increased blind effect is very powerful, increased critical strike chance against blinded enemies is very powerful, and cannot be blinded. Now, if this was unaffected by blind, this would be way more powerful because of the one timeless jewel. Unfortunately, it says cannot be blinded. Mark Mastery, marks are pretty powerful, so if you do end up taking a mark node, 25% increased effect of your mark is really good. Enemies near your marked enemy are blinded isn't super powerful anymore in my opinion. The increased movement speed, if you've cast a mark spell recently, you don't really cast mark spells yourself very often, but it's 10% increased movement speed, so if this works on triggering, then it should be good. Life Flask gaining a charge. If this was all flasks, I'd be hyped about it, but just life flasks, I mean, it will replenish them on bosses, so I guess that's okay. Dagger Mastery, unfortunately not very many people like attack while wielding a dagger, so most of this is not that hype. Maximum physical attack damage with daggers, I guess that's cool because you can hit harder. 8% more damage with hits and ailments against enemies affected by at least 5 poisons, chance to suppress spell damage. I mean, this is all cool, but it's just, there aren't very many builds that make use of dagger attacks. Now let's move on to something that I'm super hyped about. Trap Mastery. Have you guys seen this? This is ridiculous. 5% chance to throw up to 4 additional traps, half reduction on summon skitterbots, awesome, can have up to 5 additional traps placed at a time, really good, more damage from traps, increased trap trigger area of effect is okay, it's not super useful, but recover 30 life when your trap is triggered by an enemy. We're going to be able to get so much recovery on triggering traps, it's going to be absolutely insane. And then of course the node that says traps cannot be damaged, very powerful. Now, Spell Suppression Mastery. So prevent plus 2% of suppressed spell damage. I mean, that's okay, it's like 2% damage reduction on spells, it's alright. Debilitate enemies for 1 second when you suppress their spell damage. I don't think that this is like super powerful, but it's nice. Critical strike chance is increased by your chance to suppress spell damage, so this is potentially 100%. I'm not sure if this is uncapped or not. It doesn't say that it is, so I'm not 100% certain. Taking reduced extra damage from suppressed critical strikes is good. Typically you try to go like unaffected by crits mostly through like, you know, the god powers and stuff. And then 10% chance to suppress spell damage if your boots, helmet, gloves have evasion. I'm not super impressed with Spell Suppression Mastery. It could be good. I think the crit strike one is pretty solid if you do have a lot of spell suppression, but beyond that, it may be the debilitate. Should be okay. Poison Mastery got a lot of really cool stuff. These are nodes that you normally wouldn't take or wouldn't be bothered to take through like cluster jewels and things like that, and now they are simply just ready for you on the tree. Poisons you inflict on non-poison enemies deal 300% increased damage. That it was an awesome node for clear, and now we just get access to it. The damage over time multiplier you inflict on bleeding enemies, I mean, this is good if you can manage to get bleed on them. If you can do that, cool. Recover 3% of life on killing a poisoned enemy. enemy. This is really solid. It's very similar to the Assassin's, like, you know, recovery thing. Pretty good. And then Plague Bearer has 20% increased maximum plague value. That's nuts. Plague Bearer already does so much damage. That's nuts. In Evasion and Energy Shield Mastery, we have just some generic increases if you haven't been hit recently. 30% of chaos damage does not bypass Energy Shield. That's pretty interesting. And then 1 to Energy Shield per 8 evasion on boots. I don't know how much evasion you can get on boots, but this might be pretty good if you're using like the Adziri's boots. That could be pretty solid. Claw Mastery has a lot of good stuff in here. It's got the standard leech like claws normally have. Crit strikes can blind now, life gain on hit, mana gain on hit, chance to gain frenzy charges and power charges on kills. Enemies poisoned by you cannot deal critical strikes is pretty good. And then skill supported by Nightblade. No one really uses Nightblade. And then last but not least, we have Projectile Mastery. So projectiles, if you are piercing and chaining a whole bunch, they can do some extra damage. If you are dexterity stacking with a projectile, there are a few builds that do that. You get quite a bit of extra damage. We get knockback, and then we get more projectile speed or less projectile speed. I kind of go back on what I said. Maybe this is one of the least ones, but you know, if you've pierced or chained a lot of times, it's some pretty good damage at least, or if you're dexterity stacking. And that is pretty much going to be it for the video. Now, I know there was a lot to go through there, but that's really my thoughts on which masteries I feel personally are going to be good. So hopefully that kind of, you know, lets you get a little bit of an insight into what you should be choosing on any given build. Now, some of this might be wrong because, you know, they might change it little bits over the next couple of days, or maybe you've got some crazy kind of build that can benefit from something in here that I maybe thought was trash. So at first look, a lot of these look really insane, and I'm super excited about a lot of these for the builds that I have planned. So remember, boys, if you're enjoying the content, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this, and stay safe out there in Ray class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.